Hello and welcome everybody to this week's live stream. We're going to do a little bit of a countdown as I get myself all organized for today. Get everything live so our friends on Instagram can join us and give everybody just a minute to get settled in so that we can talk about today's topic, which is whether or not it is a terrible mistake to get back with an ex. Can it be a positive, productive, bright new chapter for your relationship, or is it never going to end well? On my podcast this past week, the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast, I dove into a lot of the different things to consider when you're thinking about that. And we'll do a quick recap of what those things are. But what I really want to do is hear about your questions. So hello. Thank you all for being here. And hey, as we are getting settled in, if you have questions for me on this topic, I would love to hear them. My goal for this hour is to answer just as many of them as possible. So you can just comment right here, wherever you are tuning in. And also certainly, you can get in touch with me anonymously. Like, I understand that this is personal stuff, and it may not feel good to be like airing all of your specifics publicly. If you'd like to, you can come to my website. I set up a little thing that you can use. Here, let me see if I can pull it up for you. I'm going to hide this. And we're going to show you that. If you come to growingself.com/dear-Lisa, you can submit your questions to me. I'll get it in real time and I'll be able to speak to it on today's live stream. So if you are thinking about whether or not to get back with an ex and would like to, just talk through some pros and cons here, I'm very happy to do that with you. So let me just make sure that I can see your comments. Hi, India. Happy to see you. Thank you for joining me today. And hello, Jennifer. Thank you for your question. I will be sure to answer that over the course of our time together. That's awesome. So we're just going to give this another minute, another few seconds, and then we will be off to the races. So thinking about getting back together with an ex, or if you have done this and you're like, I'm not sure if this is working out this time or not, or even, if you have somebody in your life that you love and care for a lot, a friend, a family member who is thinking about this, maybe you're worried about them, and you want to share what's going on, we could also talk about how you can support them in making good decisions, because I know that it can be tough to watch, especially when somebody's had difficult experiences with a relationship in the past. Okay, so let's dive into our topic today. So the first thing I'd like to do is just do a very, very quick review of what we discussed in the podcast this past week, because I am doing something a little bit different with the podcast. And if we haven't met yet, I am Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. I am a licensed psychologist. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, a board certified coach, and I am the host of the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast, which I've been doing for years. I love it. This live stream thing is more new for me, and I love this so much. But then I was like, let's bring these things together and make it 10x amazing. So going forward, what I'm going to be doing on Mondays, when I release a new podcast, that'll be my time to sort of dive into the details of what's going on and like the big picture concepts. But then on Thursdays, our live stream topic is going to be what the Monday podcast topic was about. So you can listen and learn on Monday, but then also be thinking about like how these situations apply to you and your life. And then join me on Thursday for discussion group, where we can talk about your situation. I can answer your questions in real time, and I am super excited about this. I think it'll be so much fun. So thank you for joining me today. And so let's just do a super quick recap about what we discussed on the podcast this past week about whether or not it's a mistake to get back with an ex and how to know. And essentially, there are 4 essential questions that you need to be asking yourself to make sure that it's going to be different this time around and positive. And if you can't get a good answer to these 4 essential questions, that's a solid indication that this is probably not actually a fantastic idea. So here are the 4 questions. First of all, why did we break up? And I know that that sounds like silly in some ways, like it's so simple, but it's actually more nuanced than that. What I mean, why did we break up, is that do you have clarity into not just the specific circumstances of the breakup, but like what were the bigger picture relational dynamics that were causing problems in this relationship for, the months leading up to the actual breakup happening, because those are different things. So when you think about the long-standing patterns or the just ways of relating to each other that were habitual, that made the situation feel like it was not sustainable for one of you or both of you, that's what we need to have the answer for. Because then with that, if you know, like, why did we break up, then you can answer or think about answering the second question, which is, what has changed since then? What has become different in one of us or both of us? Have we done some serious work on ourselves? Have we done some personal growth? Have we practiced communicating differently? Have we done like a lot of introspection, having more clarity or more insight into how we participated in those relational dynamics? And what has changed so that things could actually be different this time around? Because if there isn't a good answer to that, if it is really just more of a, well, we started talking again and some of these old feelings were coming back, that doesn't mean that this is going to be better this time around, because every relationship is a mixed bag. You probably had warm feelings and, attraction and all of this the first time around, and things still went sideways. So you need to have more than that, so that what's changed question is really important. And so when I'm saying what has changed, it's like what inside of me has shifted. How have I grown into a different person in some ways? Someone for whom those same patterns wouldn't happen again or be as likely to happen again. But then once you have a good kind of understanding of that, if you've passed that hurdle, then you can go into, how will this be different specifically? And this is where you're having conversations with your ex around, what does this need to look like specifically, with details in our day-to-day way of relating to each other. So how are we going to be communicating differently? How are our processes going to be different? Like, if this is working out, what will it look like? What will it sound like? What will we each be doing or not doing in order to make it better? And this sounds kind of tasky, but I'll just tell you, this is actually super important. And I say this, so I am a marriage counselor. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, but in a very important part of my practice at Growing Self is actually in relationship coaching. I've just found over the years that coaching psychology and really digging into a more action-oriented approach can help, I think, all of us create actually different outcomes in our lives, more so than just insight-oriented therapy, which is great for getting clarity, processing feelings, and understanding yourself, but is not necessarily the same thing as doing things differently. So as a coach, I would recommend, as you're having this how will this be different conversation, you're going into the details and you are writing them down. So I will be responsible for unloading the dishwasher or whatever it is. When I start to feel escalated, I'm going to take a break instead of, yelling. I mean, like whatever that needs to be in order for it to feel different. Write those things down, because then you will be in a great place to talk about the fourth crucial question, which is, when do we decide? If you're going to get back together with an ex, it's really important that you do this on a provisional basis with a timeline. 3 months is typically plenty of time to know if things are actually going to be different and better, if, the changes we've aspired to make are actually happening, or if we're really just falling into the same old patterns. It's very important that you have this timeline, because I personally, as a therapist, have seen so many people, get back into a relationship without having this kind of intention before they do. And it becomes another, fairly mediocre experience where, there's some strengths to the relationship, but there's a lot of angst. There's a lot of disappointment. The same patterns start happening again. But because they haven't defined for themselves, like, okay, what are we going to call this? They feel stuck. They feel trapped. They have to go through all this angst all over again, which is a really different experience of saying, okay, we decided to try this again for 3 months. It's now been 2.5 months, and you're yelling at me on a regular basis, and you're not unloading the dishwasher. So I think we can go ahead and call it. And not to be mean about it, but like, it's very important that you're setting boundaries around how much time and energy you're going to give one specific relationship, because the truth is that there are so many wonderful people in the world, and you are so loving and lovable, and could maybe have a fantastic relationship with someone where it would not be quite so fraught. But the longer you stay attached to a situation that is never actually going to be what you want it to be, you won't get to experience that. Now, of course, also on the other side, 3 months is plenty of time to be like, oh my gosh, the dishwasher, and there has been no yelling. This is great. And at that point, like, we can never like fully relax and allow ourselves to slide back into old patterns. Like, that's not good for anybody. But like, when you pass that provisional period, you can continue moving forward with more confidence and thinking like, yeah, things are going to be different now. So that is the hope. And going back to that third question, like what specifically is going to be different, it's a really good idea during that provisional period to be referring back to that list. Like, these are the things we talked about when we were agreeing to try this again. And this is what we both committed to. Is this happening or not? And if it isn't, what do we want to do about that? I will say that for all of us, a growth process has ebbs and flows, and nobody is going to just flip a switch and immediately be different forever and ever, right? All of us need time to develop ourselves, practice new ways of being, and sometimes the growth process means making mistakes that we can learn from. So, maybe there was an incident where it did get escalated, some yelling happened, but we're using that as a growth moment to be like, you know what, I did get triggered. I didn't notice that I was getting escalated. I see now what I could have done differently. And so here's what I'm going to do instead next time I start to feel that way, so that it doesn't turn into yelling. So again, I want to just have a little bit of tolerance and grace and flexibility for each other as you are practicing these new behaviors. But there needs to be a lot of effort. We're seeing each other try to do the work, actively try to be different and have a more positive experience. So just wanting to make some space for that. Okay, so that is what we discussed on this last episode of the podcast. And also I wanted to put in front of you, on the podcast, I did offer just additional free resources here. If you go to growingself.com/stay-or-go, you can sign up to get a whole package of free resources that will help you kind of dig deeper into how to make decisions So you'll get access to all kinds of free articles written by myself or other expert therapists on my team about how to get relationship clarity, signs that a relationship has, a lot of potential versus signs that it's time to call it quits. Also a curated podcast playlist, which with a bunch of different episodes that I've recorded over the years on that topic. So you can go to that link to grab it, or you can also just comment together right now. Just comment together and we will share that link with you automatically so that you can get that resource. Okay. So I just wanted to mention that. And now I really want to talk about you and your situation and your questions. So if you haven't already, and if you want to run something past me, please do. You can drop your question right here in the comments. Or if you'd like to ask a question anonymously, you can use this link here. It's growingself.com/dear-Lisa. If you submit a question to me, I'll get it in real time right now, but I won't mention your name or anything like that so that it'll be confidential. And thank you if you are one of the number of people who have submitted questions for me on this topic in advance. Since you asked them in advance, you get first dibs. So I'll be answering those first. All right, so let's get to it. I'm so excited for this. All right. The first question came from a podcast listener who got in touch after Monday's episode and asked, is it okay to set a long-term goal of getting back with an ex when I've been out of a relationship now for 8 months? And the writer said, I know I'm not currently mentally healthy enough to get back together, but it's a huge motivator for me to not feel so awful if I tell myself that eventually when I'm contentedly single, I could have another chance if she agrees. And I think that it's very important for all of us to have goals to work towards. And I just wanted to share, and I'll say this out loud, I will answer this question and actually all questions from my general experience as somebody who's been working in this space for a while. But also I want to be really cautious about not misrepresenting myself or what this is. I mean, I am not your therapist, and so I don't have a lot of detailed insight into your situation. And so I want to be a little bit cautious when giving specific advice because it may or may not be appropriate to your situation. And so I really want to give you information, but then encourage you to make the decisions that are ultimately best for you and your situation rather than substituting my judgment for your judgment, because that's, we have to be careful about that. But I will share, generally speaking, that it is wonderful to have goals for ourselves and to also have a positive vision for our life. And I'm hearing in your question that part of your vision is that you want to feel like you are happy, healthy, content being single, and that you are in such a good place that your ex would be really interested in giving it another try with you. And I think that that is a fantastic goal because if your ex is like, oh, wow, they really got their act together, a lot of other people would also be looking at you and really appreciating you for who and what you are and the amazing, emotionally mature, healthy person that you have grown into, and nothing bad could come from that. And so I think that that's a wonderful goal to dig into. What would I be doing if I were emotionally healthy? How do I become that? Is there a plan, right? And so, do you have a relationship with a good therapist who you can work on towards this goal, but continuing to create clarity in that picture, like what would be different about me and my life if I had attained this? And this is going back to me being a coach again, right? Like what is the action plan for making that happen? And if that, vision of your ex being like, wow, you are just so amazing. I so appreciate all the work that you've done on yourself. And yeah, maybe we could give it another chance. That I think that is okay. But I also just want to say out loud that you have to be really careful about getting fixated or attached to this one specific outcome that you ultimately don't have a lot of control over. I mean, this involves another human's desires and, vision for their lives and wants and needs. And so your ultimate happiness cannot be dependent on what somebody else decides to do or not do, because, I mean, who knows, right? But I think doing this work on yourself and having that as part of what you're working towards is fantastic. If you're just again, not getting too attached to a specific outcome, but a more globally, I want to be the kind of person that other people really want to be with. And so what does that mean? And I think lastly, if you ever attain this, to really then be using those 4 questions in a very intentional way to know if you have a chance. And so, for example, if you wanted to reconnect with your ex at some point in the future, I think the first starting line was, are they interested in talking to me? Are they willing to sit down and have a conversation about their potential interest in getting back together too? Because they might not be. And that's okay. Godspeed to them, because it doesn't matter. You've already done so much amazing work on yourself. You have so many other prospects. And I would imagine that over the course of doing that work on yourself, your attachment to that specific person may have ebbed, particularly if you are walking through the stages of healing in an intentional way that I've talked about in other podcasts and in other live streams for that matter. So you can go back through things and find that if you want to learn more. But fantastic question. And I'm so glad that you asked, and good luck to you. Keep in touch with me. I'm excited to see where this goes for you. Okay. Thank you so much for your questions. I see amazing questions coming in through the comments, which is fantastic. If you'd like to ask your questions, leave them in the comments or write to me at that growingself.com/dear-Lisa, and then I will speak to them. But we had another advanced question come through, which was, how do I convince my ex to try again if he's closed off to the idea? Well, I have to tell you something. And this might not be what you were hoping for, but I am here as a friend in support of your growth, your love, your happiness, your success. And if somebody is setting boundaries, if you are broaching like this, hey, let's try it again, and somebody is saying no, we have to respect other people's boundaries. I am so sorry that your ex is closed off to the idea, but we can't make other people do what we want them to do. We cannot control other humans, and a much more helpful and appropriate and I think productive use of your time would be to work through your own stages of healing, because I would imagine just by the question that you're asking, you are probably in one of the first stages of healing, which is that withdrawal phase where you're craving contact, you're obsessing about your ex, you're thinking about how do I reconnect with them, and putting a lot of energy maybe into trying to talk to them or get them to engage with you. And this is not a good place to be in, particularly if the other person does not want to do that with you. So dig in to those stages of healing. Go back to some of the past live streams or podcasts that I've recorded on those subjects to learn more. Begin working through them. And it will be a painful process. I mean, you're going to move through grief. You're going to have to, I think that the big thing here is the relationship clarity phase. Like, you're still like, well, I think we could get back together if I could only convince him. So there's some work for you to do there. Once you get that, like, okay, here's what's happening, then you'll probably move into a grieving phase. But then beyond that, I think you'll be able to do a lot of really productive work around, what did you learn and grow, processing some big emotions and taking wisdom from all those dark emotions, and thinking about changes you would want to make going forward that are going to be really beneficial for you. But you're just at the beginning stages of this, and you have to do the work in order to get to that. But I wish you all the best, and do check out those free resources that I mentioned in previous live streams, because I think they'd be really helpful for you. Okay, we have one more advanced question that we're going to tackle just because somebody got in line first, but then we're going to be speaking to the questions that you have been sharing with me during our time together on this live stream. So, the last one, a listener wrote in and said that they really appreciated the podcast. They listened to it 3 times yesterday, which is great. I'm so glad you like this podcast. And they have a question that just specifically, what is the work that we should be seeing our partners doing if getting back together is a good idea? For example, my ex is not going to therapy, does not have a clear vision for the relationship he wants in the future, hasn't read any relationship books, etc. But he's trying to be nicer to me, and he says that he will go to therapy in the future. Are there ways, short of therapy and intense self-reflection, that constitute doing the work? Also, what would you recommend to somebody who is unclear about what they want? Specific types of therapy, exercises, etc. Okay, so this is interesting, and so it sounds like well, the first thing that I would ask is like, have you answered that first question, why did we break up? And also, like, sitting down with your ex, is he able to articulate a coherent understanding of why you broke up? Like, does he have currently a mental narrative that explains to him why the relationship ended and will be that launching pad to answer the second question of what has changed? And so I don't know if you have tried to have that specific question, but like, seriously, sit down on the couch, look into his eyes and be like, why do you think we broke up? And see what he says. And if it is vague or does not really make a lot of sense, he might not have the current awareness to guide his understanding of what has changed or what needs to be different. So I think that is definitely step 1. And then step 2, what has changed inside of you? And so he's saying that he's trying to be nicer, but like how? Like what has changed? And I will just tell you, yeah, there are a lot of ways that we can all grow and evolve and work on ourselves that are not therapy and that are maybe not necessarily reading self-help books. I mean, there are a lot of very valid ways of doing this work. Like maybe he has connected with mentors in his life, people that he admires, is having conversations with them. Maybe he is listening to podcasts or thinking about things. I mean, we don't know what other people's internal processes are like, but I do think that it is valid to, before you risk your time and energy on this again, to be asking, like, what is different about you now? Like, what has changed inside of you? But also, like, for you, what has changed inside of you? Like, how would you respond maybe differently to some of the behaviors that have happened in the past? Have you done any growth work around your own boundaries or the way that you communicate? I mean, relationships are systems. It is a fallacy to believe that one person is responsible for all of the weird things that happen in a relationship. In a relationship with anyone, we are doing it together. And when one person in the relationship changes, the whole system will change. And so, whether your boyfriend has done a lot of work, what's changed inside of you that would prevent you from having the same experiences? And it could be a new unwillingness to tolerate the same kinds of behaviors that you may have experienced in the past. So, I mean, you need to have those conversations together. And if he can't articulate any of those things, if he's like, I don't know, or like not sharing or not willing to engage in that conversation with you, that would be a sign that it is unlikely to be different, at least on his side. Your side could still be different, but And then your other and then like the specifics question, I think that could actually be really helpful here. But for you, for sure, like if you're really want to try this, like maybe a short timeline, particularly if you're not getting a lot of good information back from him and you really want to try it anyway, let's do it for a month and see how it goes, right? But so your other part of this question, so like what would you recommend to somebody who is unclear about what they want? I'm not totally sure what that means, but you say in it previously that he doesn't have a clear vision for the relationship that he wants in the future. And I like, does that mean getting married or having children? Like what are we talking about here? But I mean, and again, I don't have the information. However, if there are big values-based deal breaker types of things around things that are fairly binary, black and white. Do we get married or not? Do you want to have children or not? And I am super clear. My value system, these things are important to me, and I don't want to be in a relationship that doesn't have that kind of future. If he is not in a space where he is able to articulate that or is willing to do the work to find out what he wants, I guess my question for you is like, why would you want to spend a lot of time in this particular situation? You know, again, going back to what we've talked about a lot on previous live streams and in podcasts is that it is very, very possible, not just possible, common to develop a deep attachment and love even for someone who is not actually going to be a good partner for you. So if I was your therapist or coach, I would be interested actually in exploring that with you. Like, what is the attachment to this specific person that it sounds like you're not getting a whole lot from, and just exploring that because, again, you know, for you, have you worked through the stages of healing so that you're in a place where you're making really good, clear decisions that are based on like, what do I want to move towards, as opposed to making decisions that are actually fueled by this attachment drive, limbic system, emotional mind that is not the same thing necessarily as making good choices about a life partner. So lots of resources for you. Go back into some of the last ones to find out more. You might want to check out my Xoxo book to learn more about that, and certainly going and if you want to go to growingself.com, go into free resources, blog and podcast. I have so much stuff for you. I have a whole content collection around not just relationship clarity, but healing after a heartbreak. And I think that there's a lot of interesting information in there for you that will help you get clarity around what kind of relationship you want to have and whether or not this is somebody that you want to try this with, because it might be, but it might not be. And either is okay. All right. So I hope that was helpful. And now I really want to get into some of these super juicy questions that have been coming in from your comments. And so first up is Jennifer. And if you have questions for me, we have time to get into a bunch of them. So ask your questions either in the comments or go to growingself.com/dear-Lisa, and I'll speak to them. Okay, so Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing your question, which is, my boyfriend and I recently broke up because of his commitment issues. He's in therapy for that right now. Is it possible to get together afterwards? We still do love each other very much. Okay, so it sounds like there is clarity around that question number one. Why did we break up? It was because he was unsure if he wanted to keep moving forward and commit to you and have the kind of relationship it sounds like you want to. And so I think I'm also hearing that right now you are hanging around waiting to find out if/when he has done the level of work that will answer that question number two, what has changed? And that is still in progress. And I just want to empathize with you because that's a tough place for you to be in. He's in therapy. He's trying to work on this, but hasn't yet. And I mean, certainly it is possible that if he works through his things and like, I am no longer afraid of commitment and I know that I want to be with you, like, fantastic. Then you can have really productive conversations around, super, what's going to be different for us this time around? And then, for you to be setting some timelines around, okay, we're going to try this again, and I'm not going to be doing this with you forever. So here's what I need to see in the next 3 months or whatnot, in order for us both to know that there is commitment, we're moving forward, all is well. So I guess my question for you truly, and this is speaking, I think, less as a relationship coach and more just as a therapist and an individual coach, is, how long do you want to hang out and wait around for this person to do their work, which is something over which you do not have any control, versus, your commitment to yourself and the kind of life and the relationship and the future that you want to have. And I don't know that there's a right answer to that, but there needs to be clarity and intention and the right answer for you. And it's absolutely appropriate to give the dude some space to do his work. And does that want to be 3 months, 6 months, a year? I don't know. I will tell you that if he is engaged in effective therapy, ideally with a therapist who has a specialization in coaching, so that it's not just talking about stuff, it's linked to an action-oriented, like, where are we going kind of approach, that he should be on a really good trajectory to creating change and feeling different within 10 to 12 sessions. That's like 10 to 12 weeks. If that is not happening, I would wonder. I mean, there is, very conventional insight-oriented talk therapy where he's talking about, fast, like, family of origin stuff and peeling the onion, and that can be very helpful to get insight. But it's not necessarily the same thing as, like, moving the furniture around in terms of your internal experience, But I think it is fair and valid for you to give him some time if this is somebody that you're attached to, if you see a lot of potential here. But it is also okay to set reasonable boundaries around your own life trajectory and what is really in your best interests. And I mean, I think certainly like a 6-month timeline, that if this guy is still trying to figure out how he feels, I want to be in a relationship with somebody who is so excited about being in a relationship with me, because you deserve to have that life experience. And it's absolutely okay to say that. I love you. I know that you love me. I wish you all the best. I hope that this work on yourself continues to be productive so that you can have a really fantastic relationship with a great person in the future. And in the meantime, I need to move on because, I can't attach my life trajectory to what you decide to do or not do because I don't have any control over that, right? I can only control myself. So Godspeed. And sometimes having those conversations can be fairly motivating for the other person to hear. So not saying that you would do that for strategic reasons, of course, but it could be worth having that conversation sooner rather than later, just to see if that changes the motivation on the other side. Although I will also say that for somebody to make we all need motivation to grow, and to grow in service of our relationships can be very motivating. And for people to feel like they're getting pushed into situations where they feel anxiety or fear, and maybe they are agreeing to things that they are not fully ready to do, can have long-term consequences. So, longer term, it would probably be better to give him some time and space, see what he comes back with, see what kind of timeline that's on, and if it fits for you, and to just be real clear about your own boundaries. So I hope that was helpful, Jennifer, and thank you so much for your question. And I hope that you stay in touch with me too. I'm curious to see what happens here. Okay, so many amazing questions here. Again, ask your questions in the comments, or you can submit them through my website, growingself.com/dear-Lisa, if you would like to ask your question anonymously. So it is not out for all the world to see. Okay, so next, let's talk to Linz. Hi, Linz. Thank you for joining us today. And so your question, I'm going through this with my ex as we speak. Oh, but the difference is that we live in different states now. It's been 2 years, and he reached out and planned a trip to drive to me. Great. Okay. I mean, that's wonderful that he reached out to you. I guess I would be curious to know, if this is something that you had also been thinking about or interested in, or if it was more his reaching out to you that we were like, oh, okay. But I would really encourage you, especially during this trip while you're able to spend some time together, to, have those conversations. Get him to listen to the podcast that I put out on Monday. All right, there are these 4 questions. And each of you, I mean, even in this kind of situation, listen to the podcast and write down separately, like, why do I think we broke up? And have him do the same. Why do I think we broke up? What has changed? And like actually using this as a journaling exercise. What specifically would need to be different? How long do we want to give this? And do this work independently, because sometimes if you do this together, like, one person says their thing first, it can sometimes influence the other person's responses. So to do this separately, come together and have a conversation about it, and just see what's there. And I think from that work, you will have more clarity around whether this is a good idea or not. So thank you very much for your question, and good luck. That sounds like it's going to be an exciting trip. Oh, and here is a super positive comment. Let's just look at this for a second. Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for sharing that you remarried your ex-husband and that was the best decision that you ever made. I would love to hear more, Lisa. I mean, if you're willing to share with our community here in the comments, like, what contributed to that? Did you do like growth work? Because clearly if you broke up in the past, there were problems, but then something changed in one or both of you that allowed it to be really different the next time around. And I just think it would be super inspiring for our listeners and our community if you would be willing to share that, to the degree to which you're comfortable, obviously. And thank you for your kind words about the podcast. Okay. And Grace has a very interesting question. Let's see. What can I say to my husband who is anxious and has angry outbursts? I'm avoidant and I don't want to have the conversation. Okay, so this is somebody that you're still currently with. You know what? I'm going to hang on to this question, and I would love to record a live stream that is specifically about how to manage that kind of anxious avoidant dynamic. Because I think that there's a lot. I would also encourage you to check out some of my free communication resources, because this is really a communication question and a fantastic communication question. So stay tuned, and we will definitely talk about this on another podcast. Okay, so let's go back to some of the other questions that we've been getting. And this is so great. I had a comment come through that I really want to read to you guys because I think this is important. So a YouTube viewer wrote in after having watched the podcast on the 4 essential questions to ask before getting back together with an ex, asking, how would this approach maybe be different if a previous relationship had emotionally abusive characteristics? And I saw this question. I was like, thank you so much for asking it, because it's really important that we are thinking about this. And I would say, to proceed with great caution, if at all, honestly. As a experienced professional marriage counselor, typically we don't even do couples counseling with couples where there have been abusive dynamics because it's not safe. To get back or develop more emotional intimacy with somebody where there are patently abusive dynamics. And so that would mean power and control. So when I think of emotionally abusive, I am thinking of and you can check out these free resources if you go to thehotline.org. It is a nonprofit organization that specializes in helping people in abusive relationships flee to safety, essentially. And they have some great material around what constitutes an abusive relationship. And so not all abusive relationships are violent necessarily, although some are. But an emotionally abusive relationship where there are things like power and control, manipulation, I think Machiavellian tactics that lead you to feel guilty, that isolate you, that damage your self-esteem, that beat you down. I mean, when I think of an emotionally abusive relationship, you are being perpetrated against by someone who is intentionally trying to harm you with the way they are weaponizing verbal and emotional communication, right? And so my first question for you is, why would you want to do that? And to have a very clear and strong why, with the knowledge, as we spoke to in the past, that it is easy and effortless to develop a powerful attachment to someone who is not going to be a good partner for you. And in fact, toxic relationships can be more addictive and compelling than healthy relationships. So check that first. Like, why would you want to get back in that saddle? And I don't mean that flippantly. Like, talk to a really good therapist. What are the pros here? You know, like, what's my vision for this? And make sure that you are making good decisions on your own behalf, for sure. Not just feeling this emotional tug, or that there's a perhaps less healthy part of yourself that desires to re-engage in that kind of toxic dynamic, perhaps related to old historical patterns from your history. Like, there can be lots of things attached to that. Herr Freud called it repetition compulsion. We as adults get ourselves back in same, weird situations that we were put in against our will as children subconsciously, because we think that maybe we could make it be different this next time. So, like, is any of that stuff going on? Make sure that you are in a very good place before even entertaining this, but then dig in very, very deeply to those 4 questions. Like, why does he think we broke up? And is he able to say, it was because I was emotionally abusive. It was because I was trying to dominate you with power and control. I was manipulating you. And here's why. I mean, like, you need to hear that discussed in detail and a ton of personal responsibility. One of the things that will also happen in abusive relationships, the characteristic is that abusers displace blame. So in an emotionally abusive relationship, you are probably blamed for everything, including his feelings and his actions, right? And so if there is anything besides 1000% personal responsibility, I take full responsibility. I am fully accountable for all of the things that I said, did, felt like, that needs to be there. And also, if there was a pattern of manipulation in the past, you need to be very cautious about, is this something that he's just saying because it's the right thing to say? Or is this how he thinks and feels, and are there behaviors to follow that up? So, just think about that. And then certainly, not just the answer to the why did we break up question, but the what has changed. And the answer to that needs to be, I've been doing a ton of work on myself. I realize now what was going on with me that led me to think, feel, and behave in all those really toxic and destructive ways. I have changed to the degree that I am confident that that is not going to be part of our experience again. I am no longer the person that did that previously. And, here are all the reasons why. And then a ton of very detailed. So here's what's going to be different specifically. We are writing those things down. And then if you really want to try this again, like short timeline. And you are looking at that list regularly to see, are any of these old things happening? Because, that list is going to be your biggest protector if you really want to do this again, because in the event that there was manipulation happening in these conversations, that somebody was either overselling their own growth or telling you what you wanted to hear, the behaviors will typically indicate what the truth is in fairly short order. And so for you to have very clear, strong boundaries on what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not willing to tolerate, and when you see things happening again, be done. But also, just very lastly, and I'm speaking now, I'm not your therapist, but let me, speak as your like big sister a little bit. Not all abusive relationships have violent characteristics, and emotional and verbal abuse can sometimes be the on-ramp to a relationship that could be violent. If there is a pattern of denigrating you, blaming you, victimizing you, perpetrating against you in all kinds of ways, it's just a little micro step over to violence or things that could be really, really dangerous. So there are a lot of reasons to not get re-involved with this relationship. But I'm glad that you asked this question so that I had the opportunity to speak to it here on this live stream. Certainly for your benefit, but also for the benefit of other listeners in our community who might be faced with the same kinds of decisions, just so that they can make healthy decisions for themselves. So thank you for asking it, and I hope that this helps you make informed choices. And check out those resources. Thehotline.org is where you'll find those. Okay. All right. So these are wonderful questions. And so let's see, are there any other questions that you would like to leave in your comments right here that I can speak to now? Or if you'd like to hop over to growingself.com/dear-Lisa, and I can speak to that anonymously. And give this just a second. But otherwise, if not, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciated all of the questions and comments and feedback that I got from this post, this podcast on Monday. And I hope you guys enjoy the new format with me recording a podcast topic on Monday and then speaking to it on Thursday. If you're a regular listener of the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast, you can certainly subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts if you'd like to kind of stay on board. You can also come over to growingself.com and get on board one of our email lists so that you get notified if we have podcasts coming online that are on topics that you're interested in. And you can listen to them and then either hop on a live stream with me every week or submit your questions in advance. So you are first in line. Okay, you guys. Well, thank you again so much for joining me today. This has been a lot of fun, and I will be back in touch next week. Take care.